The final days of 2025 marked a turning point for Iran. The air in Tehran was thick with uncertainty, as rumors of unrest spread from neighborhood to neighborhood. For many Iranians, the sense of unease was palpable, a feeling that something historic was about to unfold. What began as scattered protests over economic hardship quickly erupted into a nationwide movement, with demonstrations in over 340 locations across all 31 provinces. The sheer scale of the mobilization was unprecedented, as people from all walks of life poured into the streets, united by a shared frustration with years of broken promises and mounting hardship. The slogans have shifted from economic grievances to direct challenges against the supreme leader, with chants of "Death to Khamenei" echoing in city squares. The anger was no longer just about inflation or unemployment, it was about the very legitimacy of the regime. Protesters, young and old, risked arrest and violence to make their voices heard, their chants growing louder with each passing day. Some protesters even expressed nostalgia for the pre-1979 monarchy, revealing deep disillusionment with the current regime. For the first time in decades, images of the former Shah appeared in public, held aloft by those who remembered a different era, or who simply longed for change, no matter what form it might take. This nostalgia is not just about the past, but a symbol of how far trust in the present leadership has eroded. The unrest is not limited to Tehran. Western provinces like Loristan and Kermanshah have seen some of the most intense demonstrations. In these regions, the protests have often turned violent, with clashes between demonstrators and security forces becoming a daily occurrence. The government's attempts to suppress dissent have only fueled the determination of the crowds, who refuse to be silenced. This is a movement that unites Iranians across class, age, and region, all demanding fundamental change. Students march alongside retirees, shopkeepers link arms with factory workers, and women lead chants at the front lines. The sense of solidarity is unmistakable, as people who might once have been divided by politics or background now find common cause in their desire for a better future. The protests are fueled by years of economic mismanagement, political repression, and the lingering trauma of a brief but devastating war with Israel in 2025. Shops remain shuttered, prices soar, and families struggle to make ends meet. The scars of recent conflict are visible in damaged buildings and the wary eyes of those who survived. For many, the sense of crisis is not new, but the willingness to confront it openly is. Iranians are not just protesting the present. They are fighting for a future that feels increasingly out of reach. In the faces of the young and the old, there is both fear and hope. Fear of what might come next, but hope that their courage will finally bring about the change they have long dreamed of. As the world watches, a nation stands on the edge, determined to shape its own destiny. At the heart of the uprising is a catastrophic economic crisis, one that has touched nearly every Iranian family. The sense of despair is palpable, as people watch their savings evaporate and their hopes for a better future slip away. In 2025, the Iranian rial lost half its value almost overnight. Inflation soared above 40%, making even basic necessities unaffordable for millions. Wages, already low, became nearly worthless, and the cost of living skyrocketed. For many, the simple act of buying bread or medicine became a daily struggle, fueling a sense of hopelessness and anger. The government's response, a meager $7 monthly food subsidy, was seen as an insult rather than a solution. Instead of easing hardship, it only deepened public anger, highlighting how out of touch the authorities seemed with the real suffering on the streets. What began as protests over empty pockets and empty shelves quickly transformed into a broader rejection of a system seen as corrupt, unresponsive, and indifferent to the needs of ordinary people. The frustration was no longer just about money, it was about dignity and justice. Iranians are furious that national wealth is funneled into costly foreign adventures and military campaigns, while basic services at home, like healthcare, education, and infrastructure, are left to crumble. The contrast between the elite's luxury and the public's hardship is impossible to ignore. The regime's inability to protect the country or stabilize the economy after the devastating 2025 war with Israel has shattered its credibility. Many now see the government as incapable of providing either security or prosperity. Protesters now demand not just economic relief, but real accountability, justice, and a voice in their own future. The calls for dignity and reform are growing louder with each passing day. The rage is deep, and it's being expressed openly on a national stage. Across Iran, people are risking everything to make their voices heard, determined to reclaim their future from a system they believe has failed them. As protests erupted across Iran, the streets of Tehran and other major cities filled with demonstrators demanding change. The air was thick with tension and hope, as people from all walks of life came together, united in their calls for justice and freedom. But as the movement gained momentum, the government responded with a drastic measure. On January 8, 2026, authorities imposed a near-total internet and phone blackout, plunging millions into digital darkness. Suddenly, Iranians found themselves unable to connect with friends, family, or the outside world. The familiar glow of smartphones became useless, and once busy internet cafes stood eerily empty. This was not a random act, but a calculated move by the regime. By severing communication lines, the government aimed to cripple the protesters' ability to organize, coordinate, and share information. It was also a way to blind the world to the regime's crackdown, making it harder for outside observers to witness or respond to the unfolding crisis. Social media and messaging apps, lifelines for activists and ordinary citizens alike, went dark. The blackout shattered networks of communication, fragmenting the opposition and isolating Iranians from each other. Families were left in the dark, unable to check on loved ones, while activists struggled to share urgent updates or warnings. For journalists and human rights groups, the blackout was a nightmare. With no reliable way to verify reports or gather evidence, the true extent of state violence remained hidden. Stories of arrests, injuries, and deaths circulated as rumors, impossible to confirm. The world watched, but could only guess at what was really happening on the ground. NetBlocks, an organization that monitors internet connectivity, described the shutdown as a near-total disruption, one of the most severe in recent memory. The data showed a dramatic drop in connectivity, confirming what millions were experiencing firsthand. A country cut off from itself and the world. For ordinary Iranians, the silence was suffocating. Cut off from loved ones and vital news, many felt isolated and afraid, left to face the uncertainty and the power of the state alone. The blackout deepened the sense of vulnerability as people waited anxiously for any scrap of information. This blackout was not just a technical inconvenience, it was a chilling warning. By shutting down the flow of information, the government signaled its intent to act without witnesses, leaving a nation in the dark, both literally and figuratively, about what would come next. The regime's response has been swift and brutal. Riot police, Basij militia, and the IRGC have all been deployed, especially in the western provinces. Human rights groups report at least 62 deaths, though some sources claim the toll is much higher. Thousands have been arrested, with many detained without record. Smuggled videos show security forces firing live ammunition into crowds, aiming to terrorize the population into submission. Supreme Leader Khamenei has called protesters vandals and given security forces a green light for harsh measures. The judiciary has threatened demonstrators with the death penalty. The message is clear: dissent will be crushed with overwhelming force. As Iran descended into chaos, President Donald Trump issued a direct warning to Tehran. "You better not start shooting because we'll start shooting too." This was not empty rhetoric. Just months earlier, the U.S. had bombed Iranian nuclear sites in Operation Midnight Hammer. Trump's threat suggests possible U.S. intervention if the regime escalates violence against protesters. Yet the administration has avoided backing any specific opposition group, keeping its options open. For protesters, Trump's words offer hope that the world is watching. For the regime, it's propaganda fuel to claim the unrest is foreign-backed. The stakes are now international, with the risk of a domestic uprising turning into a global crisis. Trump's warning has dramatically raised the pressure on Tehran. While the U.S. threatened military action, Europe and the UN responded with diplomatic condemnation. France, Britain, and Germany jointly condemned the killing of protesters and urged restraint. The UN's Human Rights Office expressed alarm at the loss of life and excessive force. Regional rivals like Saudi Arabia and the UAE have stayed mostly silent, wary of inspiring unrest at home. The international response signals to Tehran that its actions are under scrutiny. The regime can no longer treat the protests as a purely domestic affair. The world's chorus of concern adds pressure and complexity to an already volatile situation. The Iranian leadership has blamed foreign enemies for the unrest, calling protesters pawns of the US and Israel. State media and officials push this narrative to delegitimize the movement and justify the crackdown. The regime claims the protests are an attack from outside, not a response to internal failures. This strategy aims to divide the population and isolate demonstrators as traitors. It's a convenient way to avoid responsibility for economic collapse and political repression. But for most Iranians, struggling daily, the idea that their anger is foreign-made rings hollow. The gap between the regime's propaganda and people's reality has never been wider. The human cost of the protests and crackdown is devastating. Dozens are confirmed dead, with many more missing or detained. Families are left in agonizing uncertainty, unable to contact loved ones due to the blackout. The disruption extends to daily life, businesses halted, flights cancelled, and a climate of fear gripping the streets. The psychological toll is immense, as citizens navigate a landscape of violence and uncertainty. The opposition remains fragmented, with no clear leadership or unified demands. Many wonder if their sacrifice will bring change or only more suffering. The future is deeply uncertain for a nation at war with itself. Iran stands at a crossroads, with consequences that reach far beyond its borders. A regime crackdown could usher in deeper repression. Protester success could open the door to democracy and reform. The crisis is a test for the international community and the stability of the Middle East. U.S. intervention risks war. Inaction could be seen as abandoning Iran's democratic hopes. The regime's digital blackout is a warning to the world about the rise of digital authoritarianism. How the world responds will set a precedent for future pro-democracy movements. The courage of Iranian protesters is a reminder that the desire for freedom endures, even under brutal repression. The stakes could not be higher, for Iran, the region, and the world.